All right, guys, this is Mr. Kennedy. This is the last part of your Chapter 2 lecture notes on history of resource use and conservation. Just going to ask you a few questions to kind of think about some different things here with regard to some resources and how we've used them inside and outside of the state of California. Just kind of get a finger on the pulse of where you might be in terms of your ethical decisions, moral decisions, and resource use thinking. So the first one we got to look at here, this is the Hetchy Reservoir, which if you're not familiar with it, I've kind of put a few things here on this slide to maybe help you get some geographical information and location. Basically, what we're looking at is a picture back in 1913 of the Tuolumne River, and this nice little valley here and the Tuolumne River are no longer in existence. This basically is where the Hetchy Reservoir now exists. At the opening of this valley, which you can see over here, the O'Shaughnessy Dam was built to hold back the waters of the Tuolumne River so that we could have power for, I don't know if you recognize this or not, but that is San Francisco, okay? So the Tuolumne River was dammed using the O'Shaughnessy Dam to supply water and power to San Francisco. Okay, so the question is to dam or not to dam, right? On one hand, we might look at this from a moral standpoint and say, yep, we should build that dam because I love San Francisco and sourdough bread and the San Francisco Giants, right? So we need to have power, we need to have water for San Francisco. There's 1 million people that live in San Francisco, so why wouldn't we? The flip side is, hey, when you build this dam, you have given up all of this natural resource. You have buried underwater, countless species of trees and other plants and animals. The aesthetic beauty of the area has been changed. Access to the area has been changed. So do we build a dam or do we not build a dam? I mean, even the health of the Tuolumne River is affected by the dam because nutrients that once flowed downstream all the way out to the ocean can no longer get there, let alone salmon or anything else for that matter, okay? So is it a good idea to build a dam or not a good idea to build a dam, okay? Ultimately, as we go to this next slide, who prevailed. This is just a little bit more detailed look at where the dam was built and all that kind of stuff like that from this map. Yeah, the dam was built, okay, and at the end of the day, yeah, we have water for San Francisco and power production. But you can see here's the mighty Tuolumne River, right? And look at all of the dams that have been placed along this river. It's not just the Hetchy Reservoir that was formed by the O'Shaughnessy Dam, but there are a number of dams and reservoirs that were formed further down the line, greatly reducing the amount of water that makes it to the sea from the Tuolumne River any longer, okay? So again, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing, right? That's what this class is all about, like making those kinds of decisions. So, as we move forward and we start to look at some other examples, let's take a look at what happened with pesticides in our environment, kind of like the call to action. There was a pesticide, and you're gonna see and hear about this a lot in our class, called DDT, that was readily used worldwide for the treatment of mosquito-borne infection. And it was once thought, hey, this is like, the most awesome thing since sliced bread because it was really effective at killing mosquitoes. And you can see that, it was promoted for housewives to spray their homes, and people would even drive down beaches and just fog the beaches. It didn't matter if people were there or not, okay? The DDT was sprayed, by helicopters and airplanes over towns and communities, usually at night while people slept. And it did a good job at killing mosquitoes, at least for a while. Unfortunately, we found out that DDT is a persistent organic pollutant. Basically, DDT is something that does not break down in nature. So as you spray DDT and it gets into the food chain or the ecosystem. It starts off down here with plankton that absorb the DDT, and then it marches up the food chain as fish eat the plankton, and eventually into large birds. And what we were seeing is large predatory birds like eagles were having soft-shelled eggs and failing to reproduce. So the big question is do we keep spraying DDT? Like, do we care? I mean, West Nile virus might be, gone because we've been spraying for the mosquitoes and the mosquitoes are dying, or, in other countries, maybe it's malaria. So yay, that's a good thing, right? We've gotten rid of malaria and people are doing better because there's no malaria or there's no West Nile virus. So the ethical question is, do we keep spraying DDT? Even though the end result is large predatory birds like eagles are no longer able to reproduce. It's a thought question. Do we or do we not? This idea was what Rachel Carson wrote about when she wrote her article, Silent Spring. Okay. And I did mention that a little while ago in a previous lecture. Okay. There are a couple of other examples, that I could throw at you. Examples of, foam on a creek caused by persistent non-biodegradable additives in laundry detergent in 1966. So long story short, the effluent or wastewater from a community would made it into a surrounding stream, and the soap that was in the effluent foamed up into the creek. So the question is it okay for us to dump wastewater into a stream, right? There was so much foam it even left the stream bed and went into the surrounding trees. Here's another example. Okay, this is the Cuyahoga River, and basically, kind of an interesting thing. We'll learn more about it when we get into water quality later on. But in the Cuyahoga River, this was once a pristine river, full of fish and clean water, all that. Well, because of wastewater effluent, the river ultimately caught on fire and burned, literally for months. And they struggled to put it out because of the chemicals that were in the water. So again, is it okay for us to dump effluent into a river? I mean, after all, it's out of sight, out of mind. It's easy, it's inexpensive, right? These are all the things that we have to ask ourselves when it comes to our moral and ethical decisions, right? Here's another river fire in a Chinese waterway that became so polluted it burst into flames after a lit cigarette was thrown on it, right? And you would think, oh, lit cigarette, as soon as that hits the water, it's going to go out. Nope. In this case, it ignited the gases and the liquid chemicals that were in the water. And again, the river burned, literally caught on fire from that point. So is it okay, for a business to dump into a river or a stream that we might eventually be eating fish from or drinking the water from? Couple other cases, the Santa Barbara oil spill of 1969. There was offshore drilling going on off the shore of Santa Barbara. You don't need to know all the story behind it, but is offshore drilling something that we should allow, considering the potential risk for a spill? And then, the argument is, well, the odds of a spill are really low, but, it happens, right? So do we allow offshore drilling? So that we have a more readily available source of oil, cheaper gas, things like that, and risk a spill? Or do we say no to the offshore drilling because we value the natural environment and protect it? And the negative side of that might mean that gas prices are more expensive and, oil is harder to come by, right? This just gives you another view of the Santa Barbara oil spill, and you can see where the oil basically traveled all along the coast. Okay, this is one we're going to spend a lot more time talking about. This is the BP oil spill. There was actually a movie made of this, Deepwater Horizon. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but this was the kind of thing where a floating oil platform literally exploded, burst into flames, and oil was leaked into the Gulf of Mexico, which you can see here for months, covering miles of the seaboard there, from Florida all the way around to Texas. Okay, so again, do we allow offshore drilling so that we have cheap gas, or do we go, you know what, the risk of the accidents are too high, so we're gonna prevent that. So this is just a few examples of things that I want you to think about that fall under the umbrella of our moral and ethical decisions that we have to make when it comes to our resource use. It's just thought questions. These are not things that you necessarily have to write up, but again, good examples of where morals and ethics will come into play when it comes to resource utilization. Okay.